Welcome to the roundtable discussion in the making of a 5G society. As you all know, India's 5G rollout has been much quicker and smoother. Reliance Jio and Bharti Airtel have been on a 5G launching spree across cities, and it is expected that 5G will be available pan-India by end of this year or early next year. 5G will also act as a catalyst for enterprise transformation, and an initial impact of 5G will be seen in manufacturing, gaming, and logistics sectors to start with. As 5G gets implemented fully in the next few years, enabling India's transition to a digital economy, building use cases specific to Indian requirements is critical. We have an eminent set of speakers today to discuss more about this topic. Let me now introduce to our esteemed panelists. We have Mr. Rahul Vatts, Chief Regulatory Officer, Bharti Airtel, Mr. Ravi Gandhi, Chief Regulatory Officer, Reliance Jio, and Lieutenant General SP Kochhar, Director General, COAI. Let me start with Mr. Rahul. The launch of 5G services for consumers is a good proposition, but currently there's a lack of use cases. When do you see 5G picking up on a mass scale, and what kind of use cases do you see initially picking up?
Thank you, Mansi. Thank you, ET, for this invite. Also, very good afternoon to all viewers and to General Kochhar and Ravi. I think you already mentioned, Mansi, that the country is witnessing one of the most rapid rollouts of any technology anywhere in the world. If I just take some numbers from GSMA, so at the end of 2022, that was the time when we were just starting to launch up. The global 5G adoption had already reached 1 billion connections, which is, if you convert into terms of numbers, around 12% adoption of 5G had taken place. In our own country, the way the technology is now pervading with Airtel itself being present in around more than 3,500 towns already within 6 months or 7 months of the launch. So I'm sure, the pace is going to pick up, and I think we might be able to close this year nearly with a seamless 5G connectivity all across the country. Even as this is happening, and the world 12% adoption rate for the world of 5G, well, the 5G revenues for Q4 22 were $8 compared to hardly $2.50 we have in India. That's the other challenge which is there. But setting that aside, I think bridging every town and key rural areas by September 23 is what operators are looking for. And generally, we are adding up nearly 40 cities every day in terms of launching up and going pervasive with our launch across urban and rural India now. Also, I think the Airtel 5G Plus is really going to be a propeller that will power ahead the next generation of digital connectivity. It will create new business models and even revolutionize industries such as healthcare, manufacturing, and also education. And there is a strong commitment both from the government and from the regulator to really see this phase of growth which is happening. We have talked about this earlier at many forums. We see 5G like a supercomputer, which is connected to a cloud. And we at Airtel, we are trying to work out a slew of relevant use cases. And we are trying to really ensure that we are not just the pipes, but we are actually able to provide supercomputing abilities to businesses and people who use this technology. And as the 5G now picks up mass scale, we are sure with the rolling out of networks and more customers coming on the networks, the use cases are going to get triggered by the need of the customers and need of people. That's how we really see it.
Okay, that was very interesting. So moving on, Ravi, as Rahul mentioned, globally 5G has been there for some time, but is there kind of any killer use case which you have seen globally which can be replicated in the Indian market, or you think India is a unique market, it will come up with its own set of use cases?
Thank you, Mansi. Thank you, ET, for the invite, and I welcome all the viewers as well as Rahul and General Kochhar. As far as I think 5G rollout is concerned, 5G network is still being rolled out, and the use cases will come once the network is rolled out completely and people start seeing the network with complete availability. We are rolling out one of the fastest 5G network in the world, both I think Airtel and Jio together. And India is not lagging behind now. We can't say that our network is now, we are late or something. As far as use cases is concerned, use cases will come. At present, the biggest use case is EMBB, which is enhanced mobile broadband, which provides you better coverage or better speeds as compared to 4G. But as far as other use cases are concerned, whether it is industry or IoT or gaming, etc., it may take some time for the users to actually, or the developers, the startups to actually pick up that, because most of the providers who are going to provide these use cases probably are waiting for the networks to be rolled out and adoption to happen. Once the adoption happens, we'll see the use cases the way we saw many use cases coming up in 4G when the moment the 4G networks were rolled out. So we are very hopeful that a lot of use cases will come up for 5G, and especially the use cases which requires edge computing, which requires AI, which requires the low latency applications, etc. As far as India is concerned, I don't see any specific use case which is specific to India. All the use cases which are across the world, I think, are relevant for India also, because we have a heterogeneous society with all kind of areas and population and coverage. So all the use cases which may come up in the world would be also relevant for India. So let's wait and see how the use cases picks up in India.
Right. But we have been talking about 5G and use cases. But I want to ask General Kochhar, is India ready in terms of infrastructure? How far are we from an ideal infrastructure scenario? So your comments on it.
Thank you, Mansi. It's a pleasure being on the panel with eminent people like Rahul and Ravi. It's always a pleasure listening to them. So your question is concerned, we are on the path of rolling out infrastructure. You see, we've always had some problems in infrastructure where we wanted the support of the government. We are getting support, but are we there 100%? No. We are proceeding. We have been facilitated. Operators are trying very hard. They are investing a lot of money in infrastructure. It is getting a little easier than what it was before. But with 5G, more challenges are coming up. Fiberization was always a challenge. Towerization and fiberization was 35%. We need to go up to 65%, even in 4G. With 5G now, with small cells coming up, we require fiber in the air also, because connecting the antennas back to the radio stations will require fiber-like connectivity. And that type of connectivity in urban areas can come only through fiber in the air. So those things are fresh challenges, and the old challenge of fiberization and ROW continue to be there, but they are getting addressed. And slowly we are seeing progress. We would like the progress to be faster and more economical. The charges which are being levied by some states are still prohibitive. They are slowly falling into line, but it has to be at a faster pace. And the entire universe, so to say, which forms part of the ecosystem which helps the infrastructure development, has to play a part themselves, whether it is municipal corporations, local bodies, the state government or the central government. Only then, if we do it jointly, will the speed pick up to the extent that it should.
The government has been supporting, this quite well. But what are the other policy interventions do you think are required for this ideal infrastructure scenario? There has been a RWA policy as well, but what more can be done?
See, the ROW policy itself requires legal teeth, and it requires legal teeth across the country, across all types of government. Local bodies or state governments have to voluntarily accept it, right? Because this ROW comes under jurisdiction of both center and state. So unless it becomes law, which can be legally enforced by the central government, they are at their whims and fancies whether they accept it or not. Today, we are heading towards that scenario where it can be enforced, but we haven't yet reached there. Okay, we still find pockets where the charges continue to be huge, and the advisories which go from the central government are ignored. So but on the positive side, the operators and the central government have put their shoulders together, and they are trying to do this on a war footing, and hopefully this will happen.
Right, right. Rahul, you mentioned about global 5G revenues and compared to the Indian counterparts. So in this context, I want to ask about the Indian telcos. How do you plan to monetize 5G? What are the kind of strategies you're looking at, and what are the kind of challenges? Do you think a tariff increase would suffice the monetization part?
So let me start this question by going a little bit back, where you mentioned about the use cases and about the killer use cases. Definitely, there is no killer use case in India right now, even though societies like Korea, etc., have got gaming, which are really driving the the 5G uptake. Having said that, I think 5G is going to be a gate leveler as far as our country is concerned, and we are going to really catch up on along with the industrialized nations such as in APAC, at least Australia and Singapore, etc., are quite ahead of us. But I already see a lot of use cases coming up globally, right? Even in APAC, if I just look back, I think I know of a use case in Thailand, which I think AIS developed, which basically works with with the mobile robots, right? So 5G use case is being used out there. Similarly, I am aware in Singapore, operator called M1, has worked very closely with the regulator out there, the IMDA, and they came up, for a sort of a maritime test bed, which was created out there. And Indonesia, the history out there. There are a lot of mining use cases which are being developed by Telkomsel, right? So there are a lot of things which are happening. Even in India, you are aware, Airtel has at least partners on two clear initiatives on 5G use cases, the private networks. One was with the Bosch factory in Bangalore, and then the Mahindra's, Chakan factory, where we really worked up with these. Also, there are a lot of use cases which are currently there on IoT, etc. Like, in fact, we partnered with L&T and CDAC recently, and we have really connected a lot of sensors and cameras across the fields for farmers. And this is a 100% made in India solution, which is already there. So I think there's a lot of work which is happening. Of course, a lot of work is in progress right now, and it is going to take some time for us to reach there. But I'm saying that we have made a very good start. Now, let's come back to the challenges, which you mentioned about 5G. I think first things first, I think the regulator and both the department took a very bold call last year to enable this 5G journey. The pricing were revised, and we have started rolling out massively across the country. However, the fact remains that this industry still remains under a lot of pressure in terms of revenues. And if I look globally, it is predicted that in the next 7 years, the amount of capex required for the sector is going to be around $1.5 trillion. Sorry, $1.5 trillion is what is required over the next 7 years, and this will include 5G and 5G advanced, and maybe some early patches of 6G coming in.
Okay.
However, to be able to sustain such a large amount of capex, our ARPU levels in our country are really very abysmal right now. We are hardly at around $2.5 sort of dollars in terms of ARPU, and this would really need to change. It's not just about the ARPU. Even if you look at the return on capital investment, what we employed, it's still quite low. And to be able to sustain investment, you really require things to become easier. So that's going to be one big challenge. How do we ensure the sustainability of the industry to continue to invest more and more as we go into 5G and 5G advanced? Similarly, the other big challenge I think in our country is in terms of the devices. The supply chain challenges which were triggered. Even 4G devices,
Right.
technically speaking, are 1,000, 2,000 rupees costlier than what they used to be around a year and a half ago. And then you add up the 5G now. So the challenge on devices is quite clear. And so the 5G device price still is, has to come back into the affordability range for a mass adoption to, really happen. So I think that's the, second part of the challenge which we continue to face. Third part, if I look at the sector right now, is in terms of the green energy, right? We are rapidly now, facing sustainability challenges on how do we sustain our networks with the global fluctuations, which you continuously see in terms of power requirements, in terms of, diesel. So there's a lot of pressure, to make ourselves green. And so a lot of policies towards open access, etc., would need to be relooked at by the government so that we are able to go for a mass, sort of adoption of green energy. That's one big policy challenge, I think, which the regulators will have to see. Continuing with it, I think security costs is a big area of concern. There's a lot of loading of cost happening and a lot of applications which are being used by multiple LEAs sometimes for a similar sort of data requirement. I think that is one other area which definitely, we need to see. And maybe we need to start considering a budgetary support from the USO for implementation of some of these security challenges. Right? It's high time because after all, it's the money contributed by operators. And if it is used for enhancing the security infrastructure, so be the case. As in more and more devices come into the play, and we got millions of devices come into the play, data privacy is going to be, one other area. The government is already seized of it. I think we have a data protection bill which is under discussion, and I'm sure that is something which will be really taken care of. Which brings me back to the basic raw material for growth, which will continue to be spectrum, right? And so a lot of things which are being planned in terms of, the 6 gigahertz story. And I think considering the requirements which are planned for number of billions of devices, there is going to be a spectrum requirement for future, which I think needs to be considered. Along with that, we continue the pace of fiberization, but backhaul, is still a challenge in some areas. So how do we really enhance and make the infrastructure, affordable and easy to get is another area which I think the regulators and the government would have to consider. So these are some of the big things which comes to my mind.
Great. Quite insightful. You covered almost all the aspects. Ravi, if you would like to add to this, the 5G monetization bit, what are the Indian telcos plan to do?
I think Rahul has covered most of the points, and I concur and agree with the majority of the points as far as monetization is concerned. As far as I think first point is, Rahul has raised a few relevant points. One is the ROW, as General Kochhar also raised that point. While DOT came out with a very bold policy measures by ROW rules, but these rules need to be implemented at the last level. Some of the states have adopted the policy, some of the states have not. And even in the states which have adopted the policy, the local bodies like municipalities, etc., have not done. At the end of the day, it is the municipalities who have to give the permission to roll out the network, especially fiber. So for 5G, it is critical to have almost 100% of the tower on 5G. With 30, 40, 50%, it will not work, because if you have to have real 5G and then prepare a network which is 6G ready, you have to take fiber to every tower. For that, at many places, you can lay underground fiber. At many places, you require the aerial fiber, because underground fiber, either it is not feasible to roll out or it is too costly to roll out. And in that case, the policy for aerial fiber has not been adopted by majority of the states. So that is one challenge which we see. Second, power point, which Rahul raised, is extremely important. One, like IT and ITES, industrial tariffs are applied in case of electricity. Whereas telecom, while it is the backbone for whole IT and ITES, is not treated as industry. And the tariffs which are charged by the discoms are at the commercial rates instead of the industrial rates. So that's one point which I think can bring in more affordability. Third is the device. Device is a very critical component, and the affordability of devices is very critical for basically adoption of 5G. And we have seen 4G also took so many years for the device affordability, and still we have a large number of devices which are still on 2G. So this is the time when we actually now should have a sunset plan for 2G. And also, if the USO fund or any other fund can fund the devices for the people who are not able to afford the devices, because ultimately the fund which is there for rollout or broadband penetration should be utilized for actually adoption of broadband, which is 5G. So that's one aspect I think which should be on the priority of government for adoption. As far as I think other issues are concerned, like basic raw material, spectrum, etc., spectrum would always be required when we have complete adoption of 5G and almost 100% devices are on the network. We need more spectrum, and industry would need more spectrum. So government has to start planning from now which bands would be provided as an expansion band for 5G, like in mid band. If expansion is required, which band would be required, or should those bands be delicensed, or there have been a lot of demands from other sectors to delicense many bands which are actually suitable for IMT services. Should that be done or should not be that be done? And a clear roadmap of spectrum availability for 5G as well as 6G should be there for the operators actually to start planning their investments and their network rollout strategies right from the beginning itself, instead of actually waiting and asking for the spectrum when the networks starts getting choked at some point of time. Thank you.
Okay. Since you both have been talking about spectrum availability, so it brings me to the question that, there have been reports that government is planning another round of auction. So do you think this is the right time and industry is ready for next round of auction at a time when 5G is yet to yield any kind of ROI? General Kochhar, would you like to take this first? Then probably Ravi and Rahul can answer.
Once it's briefly, Ravi has alluded to that the industry is always in requirement of spectrum. The spectrum that we have got at this point of time is inadequate for ideal rollout of 5G. We did not have contiguous spectrum or adequate spectrum in the bands that were put up for auction, which had, especially in the C-band, and therefore the industry has now about 800 megabits of spectrum, whereas we require about 200 gigabits, right? For the type of population that we have to service, for the type of geography we have to service, and it cannot be compared with examples from the US, which people are to do. Their population density is very less, and hence the utilization and loading of spectrum is less than what it is in India. India definitely requires 200 megabits. And since we cannot get that in the current C-band because of others who are using it, our demand has been that 6 gigahertz spectrum, we should get 1200 megabits for IMT. And this is something which is in consonance with international thinking also. And this will enhance the rollout of 5G and also prepare us to launch 6G as and when it comes. We are looking at that to be seriously considered by the government, and as Ravi and Rahul both said, this has to be seen seriously by the government. Government has also got to see that with 5G being rolled out, is there a real requirement of offloading data to Wi-Fi in the homes? Because 5G is giving adequate amount of coverage and adequate amount of capacity. And if this is utilized, consumers will prefer mobile in their hand giving the same type of capacity what they're used to through Wi-Fi without the limitations of Wi-Fi. So if that message goes strongly down the line, then they will realize that our demand of 6 gigahertz for IMT band is justified and will be in the interest of the government. So this is one. Second is requirement of the spectrum is always there, but because there is a lag in the previous question, what has come out very clearly is that the use cases will take time to develop. Nowhere in the world do we have use cases exclusively for 5G except in the area of gaming. Others are all 4G cases which have been implanted on 5G and doing a little more efficient work. But exclusive cases of 5G are yet to be discovered, which can be called as killer apps. That will take time. It will come and it will take time. And I think, in my mind is, in my thinking, those cases will emerge from India and the world will adopt them because of our flexibility of approach and the aggressiveness that our operators display. With that in mind, if in the interim period that till the time the use cases come up, which give us adequate amount of monetization. We can't keep infusing capital at the rate at which we have been doing currently on spectrum especially. And therefore the government has to see that they are equal partners with the industry to see that the infrastructure comes up, the networks come up of the right standard and of the right capacity to take on the loads which will come as and when use cases emerge from all sectors, not only telecom, they'll emerge from all sectors. And if they realize that, then the cost of acquiring spectrum should go down. And if the cost of spectrum goes down, only then you can keep adding spectrum to your kitty and provide better services. But if the spectrum continues to be costed the way it is being costed, then already the ARPUs are low. And for a few years to come, our ARPUs will dwindle even more. So that is a situation which is not a desirable situation. So that is why we keep demanding to the government that don't look at 5G as 4G incarnation. 5G is a different kettle of fish. It has to be looked at infrastructure being developed for the good of the country. And for that purpose, I keep mentioning, don't miss the woods for the trees. Don't look at short-term revenues from only spectrum auction. Look at the revenues which will accrue if we have strong and resilient networks which are put up, so that the other sectors can then start making applications on top of these networks and contribute to the kitty of the government.
Right, right. So, Rahul, what are your views? Do you think the government should wait for 5G to actually pick up and substantial use cases before going for another round of auction? Or do you think now you said that the industry needs spectrum? You will be willing to lap up whatever comes your way.
No, so there are two parts to it. Firstly, the thing about having an annual auction is something which were part of the cabinet package last year.
Right.
And there was a mention that there will be annual auctions for operators to pick up, and there will be some tactical spectrum which people may require once in a while. So there are two questions. One is what is immediately required, and the second is what do you require as you start investing more and more, and as the capacity, as the traffic starts increasing on these networks, right? So when you mention about challenges, the challenge is what we see for the future, because right now we've got 100 megahertz, but tomorrow when we have got a huge amount of traffic usage and billions of devices going, then will that 100 megahertz be enough? And that is the question we'll have to answer when we reach to that particular point. So for a long-term play, definitely the spectrum will be required, as we head toward. Immediately, I don't feel, that there is going to be any specific requirement, given that we just have taken and we just started rolling out the networks. The network have to get now loaded. The devices have to come in, the people have to start using it, the traffic has to start increasing. So that is the interplay which is more imminent right now, rather than to, add up more capacities of spectrum. Spectrum pickups for annual auctions is very tactical. You may require at few places, some bands of spectrum, and you may consider those depending on your need. But immediate 5G pickup, I don't see any of that happening for now, but definitely for the future as traffic picks up, yes.
Okay. Ravi, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this similar point of view, I share the same point of view with Rahul. Spectrum is required in long run. Whether it would be immediately required or not is difficult to say, because the networks are still being rolled out. As far as the other point which General Kochhar mentioned about Wi-Fi and 6 gigahertz, the offloading concept is an old concept of 2G, 3G era. There is no concept now with 5G being faster than Wi-Fi, 5G being much more resilient network than Wi-Fi. The offloading concept is over. And Wi-Fi is typically now for indoor non-5G devices, non-4G devices, communication, etc. So there should not be any reservation of any spectrum for Wi-Fi. And this 6 gigahertz band is specially required for IMT, and that's the expansion band for C-band. So that is going to be a very critical requirement for industry in long run to expand 5G networks. So that's one point. And as far as additional spectrum in long run is concerned, as the users come and usage increases on the network, more and more spectrum in all bands would be required. So government has to really has the funnel for 5G and 6G for in all the bands, not in any specific band.
Right. So government has recently announced 100 labs for R&D and 5G test use cases. Yeah. So what role do you think telecom industry can play in this? Also, do you think startups have a bigger role to play in developing use cases? Ravi, would you like to take it first?
Yeah, as far as labs are concerned, like Jio has developed its own 5G technology. Complete end-to-end stack has been developed by Jio, and on that only our network is running. We are rolling out one of the largest standalone network of the world, and all that has been developed by our own engineers and within our company. Startups and the new companies in India would have a great role to play, both in standards and development, not only in the development of use cases, but also in development of technology, the core technology itself. So this is the time now when India has to take a lead in technology development. And I think government has also announced various initiatives in terms of setting up of labs. We are also working with some of the universities where the lab test beds have been set up. So this I think, especially with 6G coming in and 5G ongoing, the technology companies are going to play great role, and we see a lot of Indian technology companies coming up in next few years, who then make us a leader in the telecom technology.
So Rahul, Airtel also closely works with startups. So how do you see this announcement by the government, and what kind of role do you think Airtel is playing on a other end involving startups?
Yeah, so I think we have something called a startup accelerator program.
Right.
Where we work with a lot of fresh ideas, a lot of innovative ideas, and really we try to sort of incubate and provide them facilities where they can really grow, expand, and even test some of their ideas and solutions. So we work very closely. We have tie-ups with the startups in education field, on monetization activities, cutting across a lot of lines, a lot of new business opportunities in terms of looking at IoT solutions, etc. So there are a lot of fields which we are currently working up with. We really feel that one difference which is there with this new technology is it's an opportunity for us to do much more than what you were able to do with conventional technologies, right? Because you have got a lot of capacities, you've got low latencies coming in, you've got high speeds coming in. So that really triggers up your imagination to what all you can really do. We had actually tried to showcase some of these at the IMC, if you remember last year, where we actually exhibited some of the use cases in terms of education, right? We actually went down to a village in UP, we sat down with children and we made them, and this was working through a startup, by the way, right? Actually make children see the solar system in a very different way. Imagine child sees himself walking on another planet, right? So this is something really which is very eye-opening. And so this really opens up the opportunity for you to do a lot of things. Even some of the use cases we have been able to do in startup space, let's say with Apollo hospitals, right? Which was on really to see on some research on colon cancer, for example, right? So how do we really use technology to see how the doctor is better prepared to able to manage the huge amount of data which is now coming to him, and how he's able to analyze those sort of things. So that is one part in the terms of the use cases. The other opportunity which is clearly coming up, which Ravi mentioned, is on the technology stacks, right? And here we have been working with multiple vendors, particularly on the ORAN opportunities which exist, whether it is the Cisco, whether it is Mavenir, whether it is TCS. There are a lot of things which we are working on. In fact, we have rolled out one of the first ORAN sites in India. Right. And, we are already working on these sites. So the data is already going on 5G on these sites. So yes, startup provides an immense amount of opportunity for us. We really incubate them and we really want to encourage them. And we welcome ideas, where we can really partner with people and try to bring something creative out of technology.
Great, great. Since you mentioned Open RAN, so I just want to ask, what's the update on Open RAN? Do you think it's picking up fast enough, or it will take another couple of years to be kind of not a mainstream, but probably niche kind of a technology?
Yeah. So I think first thing is that, the way we have been conventionally designing our networks, the way we have been seeing the building blocks of the network is all undergoing a change. It's a revolution. Sometimes I see very similar to what we used to have with the OS and open source OS, right? So really, this network opening up gives a huge amount of opportunity for us to be able to disaggregate our network and build it each stack differently, each part of the network separately, which gives me the flexibility to be able to do a lot of things. But the primary driver behind this, as was the case with open source, was to really see, can we crash down the prices of the network rollout in future. Right, towards that extent, we have made some early efforts. We've got a lot of sites now running on the technology. In terms of technology, I think we are absolutely there. We don't see no technology challenge coming out. But in terms of cost, yes, some challenges still remain, because a lot of parts of that entire ecosystem are still not scaled up. Right, so those are going to be few of the challenges. But it's like any new technology which starts up, there will be some early sort of things which come out to make it more progressive. But we are sure, and we are very keen, and we are very committed, to really work up on that space. And we see a lot of hope and opportunity. Only thing is that things have to happen a little faster now, because you see, we are already doing a very large rollout. And if things start coming in shape, maybe 2 years down the line, then the opportunity then, gets limited. And then you have to wait for another jump into, let's say 6G or another version. And then you can start really doing those things. So it's a challenging time, but very interesting time. So let's see, how this shapes up.
But with flexibility, there's a risk of security. So how do you plan to address that? And also, in addition to this, what are your strategies with respect to 5G network security?
Sure. So I think let me start by first saying that our LEAs and our ecosystem in security is very dense. And we really have a lot of things which normally you won't find, in other parts of the world. But we are a nation which has its security challenges. So really, it's for us and the government to collaborate and to see, what is the acceptable level of risk for telecom infrastructure, and what is it that we can do. And how do you do this risk assessment is the first question, right? So really, this assessment comes out of the impact about the scale which you are doing. And also, what is the level of acceptable risks you can take in designing your networks, right? In terms of, say, the grade of security. So every telco has defined, some level of thresholds which they, generally follow. And also, these are sometimes dependent on, the customers you are working with. Like for some customers, if you're in banking, etc., right, their requirements of security and the requirements of really doing things is very different compared to some other, normal, B2C customers, where the requirements might be different. So how do we handle this is what we were looking for. So I think the first is that you have to plan for the worst, right? And you have to really create a higher level of, multiple levels of redundancy, right? So that, you have got multiple layers for your network and your core systems. And these are cost effective, and you're able to really cover any breaches which really happen. Second is really, we have to go into a very collaborative mode. There are a lot of security agencies like the NSCT, NSCS, NCIPC, where we are working very closely to understand the next level of requirements and how do we shape up our architecture so that we are able to take care of, the challenges which come up. The third important leg is, of course, to have the in-source capability, right? You should have the right type of amount of scale and size to be able to manage, the challenges which come out, and should have right kind of talent and vision to be able to, manage the security. Lastly, on the 5G itself, which you asked, the key difference in the 5G, I think first is there is an increased and accelerated movement to standard IP-based backbone and protocols in 5G. Right, that's the first fundamental which is there in 5G. And the traditional IP-based traffic and IP stack is very extensively researched and well understood. However, the threat perception in 5G is a little more different. Right, so you are moving from a traditional technology where you are like masters of your game to a new technology, which, the vulnerabilities are slightly different. So that's the first recognition, I think, which you have to really do in terms of 5G. So you have to create your network architecture according to that. The second thing is that 5G offers low latency and a higher bandwidth. So which really makes the 5G very ideal for the M2M communication and remote healthcare, education, etc. So with proliferation of these devices, the impact is going to be much larger, what you have generally spread. So the community isolation risks, etc., are going to be a little different, compared to, something going wrong. So that's the second thing, I think, which you really have to, take care while designing your architecture. So with those two fundamentals in mind, it really boils down to how you plan your network, how do you create, levels of isolation, how you are able to create zones where you can make redundancies applicable. So that's, what is really there in the 5G part.
Okay, right. Ravi, would you like to elaborate a bit on this security aspect from GS point of view?
I think Rahul has already covered the security aspect in detail. Just to add that the networks, when these are designed, it's the basic security is the basic fabric of the design itself. So we don't see the standards itself covers all the security part, all firewalling and etc. So I don't see security as a big risk for 5G, though it's a complete IP network as compared to the earlier technologies where there were specific protocols instead of IP. But that we don't see security as a big challenge in the network. As far as earlier question of Open RAN is concerned, earlier, if you see the older technologies like the switches which were manufactured by two different vendors, say one by Ericsson, one by Nokia, these were talking to each other. So these were talking to each other on the open protocol. So the two networks had already open protocols. That's how the whole networks were interconnected, and the voice and data calls, the routers are interconnected. Every router is talking to the other router. The only thing which was not open was the RAN and the core communication. That was specific proprietary by the vendors. Now with open RAN means basically those protocols are also now open, that one say radio network of one vendor can be connected to the core network of the other vendor, and these protocols are being say standardized and everyone is implementing. Like most of the networks like which we are deploying are compliant to Open RAN. The only thing is that you need to enable it whenever finally when you start installing or start implementing it. So Open RAN, I think it would be a good thing if it comes, but at what time and in what form and shape it would actually get implemented is yet to be seen. And as far as security challenges in Open RAN are concerned, these are the same as overall 5G, and we don't see any challenge in that.
Okay. General Kochhar, from you also, I would like to understand, the security risk that will 5G networks will bring. What telcos can do to mitigate the risk associated with security, and how would big challenging task would that be?
After what Rahul and Ravi have said, there is really nothing much left to be said on security. But I would like to categorize security into two parts. One is at the design stage itself, and second is at the operational stage. Like Ravi said, security has to be now designed from the drawing board stage itself for 5G, right? Because of the network adaptability and flexibility, security also has to be flexible and adaptable with the same parameters if it is to be effective. Secondly, the scale of security that is to be provided will increase, because machines, sensors, etc., also now get latched onto the networks. And like I've been saying, each one of them is an attack vector. We cannot ignore just anything. And therefore, the security has to be end to end. And as far as the operational security is concerned, I think Rahul has done a marvelous job in explaining how it can be handled. And maybe the way Rahul put it across is the way it should be put across in academic institutions also. He's very right that it has to be done containerized, and it has to be done on a case-to-case basis. with adequate amount of flexibility and redundancy, and which the operators are capable of doing. It is the design stage which worries me, because that is something which is a big difference from how security was being handled in 4G. So that is something the academics are aware of, and I hope it flows down to the OEMs too.
Great, great. So that brings me to the last question of the session. We are just running short of time. So, I would like to understand what are the challenges, probably in a nutshell, that remain in the making of a 5G society. We have discussed every aspect, but in a nutshell, if you can just put it.
Okay, so let me take a first hit. I think we have discussed a lot of challenges already, but when you talk of the society per se, I think it primarily will be three particular parts. One is, first of all, we make the network pervasive all across, right? And that is a real time when one can say that the society has an opportunity to experience what you have created. And that challenge, I think the operators are very already keyed on, both ourselves and Geo, and we are sure by the end of the year, early next year, we would have reached maybe earlier, to that particular part. The second important part is once you have the network in place, is to really have the use cases and have the applications for the society to benefit from what you have created. So while we have got early green shoots of education use cases, healthcare use cases, logistics use cases, but I think the next phase of making ourselves as a 5G society requires that we have mass adoption and mass workup of these cases coming up and becoming a way of life. For example, a school which is upgrading or setting up a new infrastructure, would they consider the technology as a viable option for them to make it as a part of their curriculum, right? For example, the hospitals, will they ensure that the lot of surgeries which they are planning, or the remote surgeries which they can enable using robotics, etc., are they planning their infrastructure as per that? So that is the other part, that the use cases have to become practical, have to become easy to manage, and really for this to happen. But for that to happen, having a network, having the cases, the third thing is that how do we continue to upgrade and keep it affordable for the customer? Because the pace at which we are rolling out, there's a huge amount of sustainability stress which keeps on coming in the sector. And how do we create policy leverages to ensure that we keep on investing in infrastructure, keep on making the journey of the customer easier and easier, right? So that's the third part of the policy challenge, to how will we ensure that we will continue to invest more and more, make them more secure, make them more easy to manage. So those are the big levers, I would say: connectivity, applications, and how do we sustain this entire journey. So those are three big things for me.
Right. Ravi, would you like to?
Yeah, I think I would try to put this into three. One is the enablement for network rollout, which is basically ROW. So this enablement has to be faster than the speed at which networks are rolled out, because otherwise this becomes a bottleneck in the network rollout. So for 5G society to be really there, you have to roll out the network very fast and reach to every nook and corner of the country. Secondly, the devices. When I say devices, does not mean only mobile phone, but the end devices, which includes IoT and all the devices which can be connected on the network, the sensors, etc. So, and third is the basic use cases, which Rahul also alluded to, that the society has to start adopting it. The enterprises, the schools, the education institutions, factories, they have to now start planning their businesses, their activities in such a way that they start using technology as one of the basic feature in their scheme of things. If it's an educational institution, how do they see use of this technology for teaching or making use in the curriculum? The factories now starts to thinking in a different way, the way they are planning their the plants, etc. They have to plan with this connectivity in mind, remote access in mind, the automation in mind, using the 5G technology. So I think when the various verticals in the society also starts thinking in terms of using this technology as a basic ingredient while planning their activities, would be really a 5G connected society.
General Kochhar, your comments.
Mansi, you put me at a disadvantage. Okay,
How, sir?
but I still try. Well, the gurus have already spoken, so okay, I'll put it in 3 buckets. One is creating an understanding. You see, the 5G ecosystem is quite different from the 4G ecosystem. In 4G, the parameters were more or less fixed. That these are your networks, this is what we can provide, and now you build your businesses on this. Whereas in 5G, it is the businesses which will lead. They will say this is what we want, and 5G will provide. Right now, that understanding must go to people, and that should be done in a structured manner, and only then we'll be able to find applications which are worth the while. So the understanding is first. Second, after that is enablement. And about enablement, Rahul and Ravi have spoken quite a lot. They have spoken about how the networks need to be universally provided across the country. They have already spoken about the device ecosystem should be affordable, the network should be affordable, service should be affordable. They have alluded to making an ecosystem available where people can try out their ideas, and the government has done that by setting up the labs, and they've also done setting up of centers of excellence for tweaking of technology. And a thing which I would like to bring in is about enabling manpower, skilling. Putting all these things together and not having the right kind of people to man this entire ecosystem will be disastrous. So we have to now look at this very carefully. And you already see that the trend is now towards exploiting data sciences, AI, etc. So those things have to be built in, and the providers as well as the users have to jointly sit together and see that the skilling happens appropriately, and we now start skilling not the blue collar workers, but we start skilling the no collar workers. And the third stage, of course, is exploitation. Once all this is in place, then all of us have to get together, the government, the operators, the OEMs, and the users, to see that the entire networks are exploited to the hilt. And all tweaks that are required are done in real time for the benefit of the ultimate user. So I think this is what my ideas are about your question. But I ditto whatever both Ravi and Rahul said. Thank you.
Thank you. With this, we have come to the end of insightful discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mansi.
Mansi.
Thank you, Mansi. Thank you, everyone.